begins with NBC, live from around the world. Today, nightly news and Dateline, continuing coverage on MSNBC, the global markets on CNBC, and local reports on your NBC station. Join Tom Brokaw and Katie Couric live in Times Square. The new millennium starts on NBC.
Good evening. You're looking live at Times Square in New York, where a massive crowd has been gathered since early this morning, waiting patiently for the stroke of midnight, now less than 6 hours away, signaling the dawn of a new year, a new century, a new millennium in the United States. The traditional ball, this year made of Waterford crystal, will drop at the stroke of midnight, and the celebration will begin here as it has been going on all day around the world, celebrations of beauty and hope. New Year's Eve, 1999, the dawn of the first morning of a new millennium beginning in the Pacific. In more than 120 countries around the world, it is already the new year 2000. In Moscow, surprising news from the Kremlin, Boris Yeltsin resigns as president. And end of the millennium jitters, computers, national security, banking and health. At this moment, all is well. And here in New York, Times Square, the final countdown to midnight, 8,000 police officers among the crowd of an expected 2 million.
This is a special edition of NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, reporting live from Times Square.
Good evening. In more than half the world tonight, it is a new day, a new century, the beginning of a new millennium. And so far, it has been a joyful, peaceful, and largely trouble-free transition as time now sweeps toward the eastern shores of North America. It began early this morning in the Pacific in large ways and small. Sydney, Australia, showing why it is one of the cities of the future. Hong Kong, now a part of China, but a city with its own distinctive identity, combining the modern and the traditional. Bangkok, Thailand, where the ancient past and present and future came together in a pageant of dragon dancers and delicate beauty. Moscow, the Russians gathering outside the fortress of the Kremlin to ponder a new century and a new president with the resignation of Boris Yeltsin. Rome, the eternal city, St. Peter's Square, where Pope John Paul, frail at 79, but the Holy Father had praise and admonitions for the faithful. Back here in Times Square in New York, the granddaddy of America's New Year celebrations, where more than 500,000 people gathered early this morning, and they have been filling this square all day long. We expect the crowd could be as large as 2 million by the time midnight arrives. It's worth reminding each other that none of us will ever see anything quite like this again. The calendar turning to another 1,000 years. And as NBC's Jim Maseda tells us tonight from London, everyone wanted to be in on it. Jim?
Tom, long before most Americans even got up today, people elsewhere were marking their millennium in their way.
19 time zones from New York City, the islanders of Kiribati in the South Pacific. A village elder hands a burning torch to a young boy, a symbol of continuity.
Take this torch of peace and hope from Kiribati.
This, the first New Year celebration on the planet. Only 18 minutes later, on Chatham Island off New Zealand, a new life for Monique and Dean, perhaps the first bride and groom of the third millennium. And the first baby? 6 were born in the first 20 minutes of New Zealand's New Year. Meet Otupu Tatuani, the millennium's first girl. As the year 2000 sweeps across the globe, celebrations take on many faces. Chairman Jiang Zemin leads his nation in festivities in Beijing, while across town, 2,000 Chinese couples tie the knot, one of thousands of mass weddings across continents today. From the cast iron bell struck 108 times, the traditional Buddhist start of the New Year in Tokyo, to the less conventional 100-foot bungee jump in the town where the jump was invented, Queenstown, New Zealand. Even at the site of Egypt's Giza pyramids, a truly millennial mix of old and new, a 12-hour laser show. In Athens, the ancient Acropolis alight, where past and future merge. In Cape Town, former South African President Nelson Mandela passing his torch to a new generation. returning to his prison of 18 years on Robben Island. And Germans in Berlin, marking their millennium at Brandenburg Gate, the very spot where only 10 years ago a wall divided them, east and west, and the world.
And it still won't be New Year's for the people way out in the west in French Polynesia for another 11 hours. This party is far from over. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC. Jim Mercedes tonight. Now let's go to France, where New Year's celebrations have been muted somewhat by a week of deadly weather throughout that country. But in Paris, the festivities did go on as planned, and NBC's Donna Friesen is in the heart of the French capital and joins us now. Donna?
And Tom, the City of Lights certainly lived up to its reputation. I'm above the Champs-Élysées, which is now a mile-long sea of lights, of music, of people, of Ferris wheels. But of course, the focus, the highlight, was about half an hour ago at the Eiffel Tower. It shimmered, it glowed, it erupted, it was dressed in lights and fireworks that 20 mountain climbers spent more than 3 months installing, almost 8 miles of lights, a cost of $2.6 million. The goal was to create an illusion of the Eiffel Tower blasting off, and then moments later along the Champs-Élysées, a number of Ferris wheels began spinning in unison. They're not rides so much as works of art designed to create the illusion of a train moving down the Champs-Élysées, bringing France into the next century, into the next millennium. So, Tom, there was massive security in place here tonight, but so far everything has gone very smoothly in Paris.
Thanks very much, NBC's Donna Friesen tonight on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. But the most stunning news of the day did come from Moscow early with the surprise announcement from Boris Yeltsin that he is resigning as president and turning over power to his prime minister, Vladimir Putin. The transfer has been peaceful. Elections are scheduled in 3 months. But there's much more to this story than just the surprise. And NBC's Dana Lewis is in Moscow tonight. Dana, what's the latest there?
Well, Tom, Boris Yeltsin chose the last day of the year to drop a political bombshell. Midnight in Moscow, not only the beginning of a new century, but the beginning of a new political era. It was high noon during his New Year's Eve address when Boris Yeltsin made his stunning announcement. He would resign as president effective immediately.
I am stepping down ahead of term. I understand I must do it, and Russia must enter the new millennium with new politicians, new faces, and with new, intelligent, strong, energetic people.
Yeltsin, who had only 6 months remaining in his term in office, named Vladimir Putin as acting president. The 47-year-old Putin, a former KGB agent and then an intelligence official, had little political experience until he was tapped as prime minister just 3 months ago. And now, soon after Yeltsin's announcement, Putin was given the briefcase with the launch codes that control Russia's nuclear arsenal. Why did Yeltsin step down? Chronic health problems, his heart, ulcers, and bouts with pneumonia have kept him off the job. And there are questions about whether Yeltsin and his family use their power and influence to get financial kickbacks. In fact, today, one of Putin's first moves, a guarantee of immunity from criminal prosecution for Yeltsin and his family. As for the man who impressed the world when he stood on a tank in 1991 to protect democracy, today he apologized to Russians for disappointing them in the last few difficult years.
I want to beg your forgiveness for your dreams that never came true.
Then he waved goodbye to spend New Year's Eve alone with his family. In a midnight speech, Putin here let everyone know that he is very much in charge. He says he won't tolerate anyone attempting to undermine his authority. He is considered to be a formidable candidate, tough to beat in the upcoming presidential election in March. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Dana Lewis tonight in Moscow. At the White House tonight, the President, the First Lady, and Chelsea Clinton are hosting a Millennium Dinner that is being called a salute to American achievement. Along with the usual Washington notables are many celebrities. All of them are lining up at this hour to shake the hands of their hosts. Earlier in the day, the Clinton administration was crafting its response to the news of Boris Yeltsin's sudden departure from the Kremlin and looking forward, it said, to working with the new man in charge, Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. NBC's White House correspondent is David Bloom, and he joins us now from the White House. David?
Tom, officially, Washington is welcoming Yeltsin's successor. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright calls him a hard worker, a can-do guy. But it is Vladimir Putin who has staked Russia's pride and his own political future on waging a brutal war against separatists in Chechnya. Day one of Putin's presidency, the war intensifies. Russian troops fire 3 Scud missiles into Chechnya. Stoking Russian nationalism, Putin, the former KGB agent, has seen his popularity soar as Russian troops assault the Chechen capital, Grozny. Just last month in Oslo, Norway, Putin rebuffed President Clinton's attempts to urge a negotiated settlement to the war. Critics call Putin calculating and ruthless.
We do not know very much about him beyond his facade of a former KGB officer who is not afraid to spill blood.
But tonight, President Clinton says he welcomes Russia's peaceful and democratic transition. And a senior White House official calls Putin, quotes, somebody you can do business with. But a top Russia scholar says Putin makes me nervous.
He could be the person that brings Russia out of its decline and restores Russia as a great nation, or he could be the leader that makes Russia into an authoritarian regime again.
Of course, tonight President Clinton's focus is less on Russia than on the millennium celebrations here in the nation's capital. Tonight the President, the First Lady, Chelsea, they'll all join more than 100,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial, at the Washington monuments to celebrate the new year amid some of the tightest security this city's ever seen. Tom.
Thanks very much, NBC's David Bloom, and of course we'll have live coverage of that later. We want to remind you that in just 20 minutes we'll be going live to London. London claims that it's going to win the competition among the world's greatest cities for this celebration, welcoming in a new millennium. Among other things, they're going to set the Thames River on fire. But now let's go to Rome, the Vatican, where Pope John Paul has just welcomed the new century in front of a huge crowd at St. Peter's Square. For the Pope, this night marks the fulfillment of a very personal mission. NBC's Keith Miller is at the Vatican, and he joins us now. Keith?
Tom, in St. Peter's Square, where it's standing room only, about 100,000 people joined the Pope here to count down the clock to the new millennium. The security was very strict, but nonetheless, people were enjoying themselves immensely. The Vatican, of course, is not a place that hosts parties, but there was one here tonight. Appearing just before midnight, Pope John Paul joined the crowd to watch the fireworks over the Vatican. Then he spoke, quote, to the city and the world, unquote, in a blessing. The Pope wishing everyone a new year filled with serenity and happiness. For the 79-year-old Pope with deteriorating health, this is a milestone for him. He was hoping, of course, to lead the church into the third millennium. He has now succeeded at that. And he has another wish for the new millennium, Tom, and that is to go to the Holy Land. He plans a trip to Jerusalem, Nazareth, and Bethlehem in March. Tom?
Thank you very much, Keith Miller. Let's go ourselves now from the Vatican to the Holy Land, the Middle East. First to Bethlehem on the West Bank, where the new century is arriving, with a candlelight vigil in the streets of that ancient town where Christ was born. Then there's New Year's Eve in Jerusalem, where tonight Christmas pilgrims have gathered at the Mount of Olives, some to pray, some to celebrate, some who say they are awaiting the arrival of the Messiah. NBC's Martin Fletcher is there and joins us now. Martin?
Tom, after so many fears of terrorist attacks or mass suicides came to nothing, a day of peace here and great relief. But there were no great celebrations either. Meanwhile, the few Christian tourists who did come to celebrate the millennium gathered here on the biblical Mount of Olives. This is where Christians believe Jesus spent his last days before his betrayal. And from here, they say, he ascended to heaven. So for many faithful tonight, it was a pilgrimage into the new millennium in the footsteps of Jesus.
To do that now in this particular moment, it just is something very profound.
The faithful planting a cross at midnight, marking 2,000 years of Christian history. So far, the Israeli government's special millennium headquarters is as quiet as the rest of the country. No trouble at all so far, no terrorism, and no Y2K problems either. But with continuing terrorist threats against Israel and millions of Christians expected to visit the Holy Land in the year 2000, tonight is merely a quiet start to what promises to be a busy and uneasy year. Tom?
Thanks very much. NBC's Martin Fletcher tonight in Jerusalem. I'll be right back from here in Times Square, the latest on the countdown to Y2K. looking live once again at the crowds who've gathered in Times Square. It could reach 2 million people before midnight tonight. Obviously, they're not worried about terrorism or Y2K computer bugs. In fact, in most places around the world where the century has already turned, so far so good for the Y2K bug. No problems whatsoever. Let's go to NBC's Robert Hager now, who's in the Y2K Command Center in Washington, D.C. Bob, does look pretty good, doesn't it?
Sure does, Tom. Already after midnight in 120 countries now, and no problems reported. The cash machines are working, the lights are on, the planes are flying, and no problems with phones other than heavy, heavy calling. Bodes well for the U.S. switchover still to come. So as officials here follow the changeover worldwide, they find Australia, phones here and elsewhere jam from heavy use, but not from Y2K bugs. Japan, American Express and MasterCard monitoring from the U.S. say Asian transactions going through smoothly. Energy Department says nuclear plants make the switchover successfully in Japan, Korea, China, India, Pakistan, and Russia. And in Britain, a hacker breaks into the British Railways computer site, posts a hoax notice that the railroads shut down. Not true. But good news so far, says U.S. Y2K czar John Koskinen.
I think it's too early to declare victory, but we are and continue to be pleased with the ability of systems thus far around the world.
In the U.S., where the millennium's still ahead, no lines at gas stations, heavy buying at groceries, but no hoarding. Worldwide, then, the only real Y2K-related problems documented so far, a minor power plant outage in Japan that was quickly fixed, and in Delaware, at the racetracks, the slot machines quit suddenly. Fortunately, that, too, fixed quickly, as officials wait now for the midnight hour here in the U.S. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Robert Hager tonight. I'll be right back with a look at Y2K air travel tonight. Lots of fears of air chaos. So far, no difficulties. You continue to look at Times Square here in New York.
Start the millennium with NBC News.
The party continues on the first day of this new century. Even as the cleanup begins, the celebrations just don't quit, but they are joyful and tranquil.
We're deeply grateful that the celebrations were both jubilant and peaceful.
Americans optimistic about the future.
We're excited about seeing what new advances are going to take place with technology, and we're excited about going forward.
And there is a collective sigh of relief. No trouble, no Y2K glitches.
I'm pleased to report that what you already know, that we don't have anything to report.
And in Russia, the new president wastes no time showing who's in charge. All this on the dawning of a new millennium circling the globe.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News, reported by John Siegenthaler.
Good evening on the first day of 2000, when the world was prepared for something to go wrong. By all accounts, that simply didn't happen. There were no major computer problems reported, and despite the concern about terrorism, the worldwide celebrations were remarkably peaceful. We begin our coverage tonight on the new millennium with NBC's Robert Hager at the Y2K Command Center in Washington. Good evening, Robert.
Good evening, John. Well, things couldn't be going more smoothly. So smoothly, some are even asking if all that preparing was necessary. But the headline is that the hour is come and gone, and on this day after, everything's fine. Planes are flying, though holiday travel's extremely light. Trains are running. Traffic lights functioning, lamps lighting. There's not been a single power outage anywhere in the U.S. attributed to a Y2K problem. Cell phones are working, regular phones too. The water's running everywhere, cash machines spitting out money, and the internet operating without delays. The government's Y2K czar, John Koskinen.
I think I would say I'm pleasantly surprised. We expected that we would see more difficulties early on, particularly around the world.
The nation's emergency director, James Lee Witt.
I'm pleased to report that what you already know, that we don't have anything to report.
It's been a day for testing, airlines checking things like luggage. The New York Stock Exchange provided this video of testing systems for Monday's reopening of trading. Glitches have been only minor, without affecting service. Small problems fixed quickly at some power plants and with some air traffic control equipment. A malfunction of a military spy satellite, Defense Department's John Hamre.
For a short period of time, we were not able to process the information that the satellites were sending to us, but we're operational now.
Hospital emergency rooms watching for problems with medical equipment, finding none. George Washington University Hospital's Dr. Ray Lucas.
Certainly the flu bug has affected us much more than the Y2K bug, which I think is probably non-existent.
So is all the talk about potential Y2K problems a lot of hype? Ask the nation's retailers who did a brisk business on this New Year's holiday. Kathy Hotka speaks for them.
I know there's been some question about whether all of this time and effort has been wasted. And the answer is a resounding no way.
Officials argue it's all going well only because problems were fixed in advance.
My hope is that people, as they look at the literally billions of dollars spent on this problem, will understand that rather than this being an example of why we shouldn't pay attention to problems, this should be viewed, I think, as a demonstration that a major problem has been met because people paid attention to it and worked together.
And there are a few hurdles left. Tomorrow will be one test, for instance, when return travel from the holidays picks up. Monday, a big test when much of the nation goes back to work. And tests later, too, leap year day, for instance. But clearly, we're over the biggest hump now, and the Y2K bug has been met and conquered. John?
NBC's Robert Hager at the Y2K Command Center tonight. Thanks. In the nation's capital, as in many cities, the day after a spectacular celebration. This one under the watchful eye of the President and the First Lady. NBC's David Bloom is at the White House tonight. Good evening, David.
Good evening, John. President Clinton says he's just grateful that the New Year's celebrations were both jubilant and peaceful. And tonight, the president's holding out the prospect that the new century might bring, quotes, unprecedented peace, freedom, and prosperity. Here in the nation's capital, as elsewhere, Americans awoke with a sigh of relief and a sense of wonder, cleaning up from last night's carefree festivities on the Washington Mall, lining up in unusually large numbers for the daily White House tour.
Oh, I'm really excited about the new millennium, and I think it started out wonderful here in Washington. We had a great time.
In his first 21st century address to the nation, President Clinton marveled at how billions of people had watched the worldwide celebrations, sharing an interconnectedness, which he says is the key to understanding the new millennium.
To advance our interests and protect our values in this new interconnected world, America clearly must remain engaged. We must help to shape events and not be shaped by them.
But even as the president, looking exhausted, spoke glowingly of how technologies like the internet have transformed the globe, many Americans enjoying a beautiful New Year's Day in the nation's capital expressed unease about the technology reshaping their lives and skepticism about the prospects for unprecedented peace.
I hope that the new technology is used for the right purposes.
The violence, I wish that would stop. You know, I'd like to see that stop. I'd like to see us become one country, one people.
But as Y2K worries vanished, many others were upbeat.
We're excited about seeing what new advances are going to take place with technology, and we're excited about going forward.
Bottom line here at the White House, they're just relieved. No millennium violence, no major Y2K bug. Rarely has so little happened in Washington, and so many people rejoiced. John?
NBC's David Bloom at the White House. David, thanks very much. Now to Russia and the fallout from Boris Yeltsin's surprise New Year's Eve celebration. Within a matter of hours, the new president is already making his mark. NBC's Dana Lewis reports from Moscow.
Even before the first light of a new year dawned on Red Square, Russia's new president showing who's in charge. A surprise visit to a war zone. Vladimir Putin congratulates his army, hands out hunting knives with his name inscribed on the blades. But he stayed away from the more than 200,000 Chechen refugees still under bombardment New Year's Day.
There simply can't be challenged. I mean, he's already acting president, will be president, because he's very tough, because he speaks the language of force.
Within hours of Boris Yeltsin's surprise early resignation, Putin made his first public address as president to his nation. A New Year's Eve warning.
There is and will not be any power vacuum in the country.
He cautioned against anyone threatening his authority. He promised to protect freedom of speech and freedom of conscience, but some found that unconvincing.
Nothing in his background indicates that he shares liberal views.
Putin now commands constitutional authority in Russia and has the West's attention as a 47-year-old man now with the black briefcase, inside a button that launches Russia's nuclear weapons. No critical decision to make today, as computers rolled over into the year 2000 at Russia's military early warning command center. Generals claimed there were no glitches from Y2K. Cooperation and reassurance on the ground in America. At Peterson Air Force Base, Russians and Americans sat side by side through midnight, monitoring launch sites, all quiet. Today, President Clinton spoke with Putin by telephone for 10 minutes. They exchanged New Year's greetings and pledged to work together towards resolving differences. For the moment, Russia's acting president. To keep the job, Vladimir Putin must win presidential elections this spring. Now, out of Boris Yeltsin's shadow, Putin is about to reveal more of who he is and in what direction he intends to take Russia. Dana Lewis, NBC News, Moscow.
And when NBC Nightly News continues in a moment, the day after the night before, the celebrations continue in this country and around the world, even as the cleanup gets underway. From coast to coast on the first day of the new century, it has been a time of recovery, relief, and a whole lot of cleanup. We have two reports, beginning with NBC's Dan Abrams in the East.
In New York, even cleanup can be cause for celebration. Today in Times Square, 5 tons of confetti was blown, swept, and ultimately disposed of. That's in addition to another 30 tons of garbage from the world's biggest New Year's Eve bash.
This was the worst I ever seen. We kept cleaning, the wind kept blowing, and it was like fighting a losing battle.
All along the East Coast, from Boston to Miami, municipal hangovers were cured with brooms and dustpans, while the partiers recovered on their own. In some places, the festivities just kept on going. In Philadelphia, it was the annual Mummers Day Parade. And in New Orleans, a celebration with the world's largest Bloody Mary, 1,000 gallons worth. And then there are the traditional New Year's Day bowl games. But in many big cities like New York, fear led some to wait till today to celebrate in public areas like Times Square.
Very concerned about how the security. So that's why we didn't come last night. That's why we're here today, after we saw that everything was okay. Now we're here.
And while New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani was in Times Square last night, he too was breathing easier today.
There was a great deal of relief. And for all the things that people were afraid of, we have to be very thankful that we got through all of it.
For some, getting through all of it meant something special. These Virginia twins straddled the centuries. A girl born in the final moments of 1999, her brother in 2000. And this man never thought he would even live to see the 21st century.
And I was so dedicated towards living past midnight and getting to 2000. I didn't care if they bombed the building as long as they did it after midnight.
And while midnight came and went without any problems, in New York, as workers dismantled the final remnants of the party, the police were still on hand, just in case. Dan Abrams, NBC News, New York.
This is Kelly O'Donnell in Pasadena, where the day after is the main event. A tradition marching into its 3rd century, the 111th Tournament of Roses Parade, watched by more than 365 million TV viewers around the world and by hundreds of thousands along the 5.5-mile route.
It's big. It's spectacular, something kids have to see at least once.
A vision less dazzling in San Diego. The bagging, the shoveling, the unexpected signs of that party long over.
I'm sure we'll find some wild things. We haven't made it to the fountain yet. I know what's floating in the fountain yet.
In Portland, Oregon, back in business, plywood comes off downtown shops, and a sure sign the party's over, the portable toilets trucked out. But farther north in Seattle, no need for the big cleanup. The Millennium Bash at the Space Needle canceled. Fears of a possible terrorist threat. The mayor's office opted for a low-key fireworks show instead.
I wasn't that disappointed. People could stay home and watch.
But Seattle, like Virginia, gets bragging rights too, thanks to Santos and Orlando Villafuerte, the West Coast Millennium twins. One brother before midnight, the other 2 hours later. Siblings a century apart. A different delivery in Los Angeles. Cash arriving on time, no banker's hours here, a first. Some branches open on this holiday.
We've had a few customers. They're pretty reassured that there's been no problems.
Spit out money, I mean, it works. The world didn't come to an end.
The 20th century, now just history, a new year and new era marked in time. Kelly O'Donnell, NBC News, Los Angeles.
When NBC Nightly News continues in a moment, London and points east party on. On this January 1st, it's become clear that many people on the planet have no intention of cutting short their Millennium Party. Here's NBC's Jim Maceda.
From daybreak on a remote island in Kiribati, South Pacific, to noon church bells across England, to Samoa, the last place on Earth to usher in the new year, January 1st, 2000 swept across 24 time zones today, the dawn of the third millennium. As the sun rose over the Great Wall of China, Mount Fuji, Japan, the ancient pyramids of Egypt. Today, a world day of peace for the Catholic Church. Pope John Paul II saying Mass in Rome.
I wish a happy and blessed New Year.
The 79-year-old pontiff's prayer that peace become the language of all people. And at least for today, that wish largely coming true. Even as the debris of midnight parties, drawing millions of Europeans, was collected in the squares of Berlin, Rome, and London, the celebrations continued, largely without incident. A street fair right next to Buckingham Palace. Royal security and protocol exceptionally relaxed. Even the Queen getting in the festive spirit. She kissed her consort, Prince Philip, in public for the first time. In downtown London, a New Year's Day parade, including over 6,000 young cheerleaders from across America, flown here on what is being called the biggest peacetime airlift of U.S. civilians.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I didn't want to miss it.
While on the other side of the planet, tourists flock to Cambodia's Angkor Wat Temple. In a country ravaged by war, thoughts today also of peace.
Well, I would hope that for Cambodia and the rest of the world that in the next millennium, people would have more peace.
And on a day when so many feared terrorist attacks, computer mayhem, even nuclear meltdown, the worst millennial glitch in London, an apparent broken clutch on the world's largest Ferris wheel, keeping people off. There was some violence. French riot police clashed with youths in Paris and Strasbourg, who set fire to dozens of cars overnight, arresting 150. In Copenhagen, Denmark, more clashes and arrests. But mostly revelers across 7 continents on their best behavior. From Tiananmen Square, Beijing, to Edinburgh, Scotland, people mark this unique day in joy. Jim Maceda, NBC News, London.
A program note now. International, domestic, and political developments in the year 2000 are the topics tomorrow on NBC's Meet the Press. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and John Koskinen, the chairman of the President's Council on the year 2000 conversion, are Tim Russert's guests. When NBC Nightly News continues in a moment, the new century in an ancient land.